The doctor's hand was shaking when she slipped that folded yellow post-it into the side pocket of my canvas bag. I watched her do it. She didn't say a word at first, just glanced toward the door like someone might burst through any second, then leaned in close enough that I could smell the faint coffee on her breath and whispered, "Just run away from your family now. Don't ever think of looking back. My name is William, and I'm 73 years old. I've survived 2 wars, buried a wife I loved more than my own breath, and raised 3 children who I thought would carry my name with honor. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what that doctor was about to tell me. What could possibly make a medical professional, someone bound by oaths and ethics, tell a grandfather to abandon his own blood? I sat there in that sterile consultation room, the kind with motivational posters about wellness peeling at the corners, and stared at her. Dr. Amara Chen. She'd been my physician for 6 years. Steady, calm, the type who never flinched when delivering bad news. But right now, her eyes were wide, her pupils darting between me and the hallway outside. "William," she said quietly, gripping the edge of her desk like it was the only thing keeping her upright, "I need you to listen very carefully. The blood work you came in for last month, the routine panel, it showed something unusual. Traces of a sedative. Low doses, spread out over time. Someone's been dosing you." The air in that room turned cold. I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights above me, that sharp buzzing that gets louder when everything else goes silent. My fingers curled around the armrests of the chair. "What are you saying?" I asked, though part of me already knew. She pulled up my file on her screen and turned the monitor toward me. Columns of numbers I didn't understand, medical terms that blurred together, but one word stood out in red: benzodiazepines. "It's a class of drugs used for anxiety, sleep disorders," she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "But in controlled repeated doses like this, especially without prescription, it can cause confusion, memory loss, disorientation. William, someone close to you has been giving this to you intentionally." Before I dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, please like and subscribe. It helps me keep sharing more. My mind started rewinding. The past 6 months had been a fog. I'd chalked it up to age, to grief, to the natural slowing down that happens when you hit your 70s. But now, sitting in that chair, I remembered things differently. The mornings I couldn't recall what I'd eaten for breakfast. The afternoons I'd wake up on the couch with no memory of falling asleep. The nights my son Richard would smile at me over dinner and say, "You're getting forgetful, Dad. Maybe it's time we talked about next steps." Next steps. That phrase had been floating around the house for weeks. I thought he meant helping me organize my finances, maybe hiring someone to check in on me. Now I wasn't so sure. "Who would do this?" I asked, but my voice cracked halfway through. Dr. Chen reached across the desk and put her hand over mine. Her palm was warm, grounding. "I don't know," she said. "But when I ran a second test to confirm, I also checked your previous records. This has been going on for at least 4 months. Whoever it is, they have consistent access to your food or drinks." I felt my chest tighten. 4 months. That was right around the time Richard and his wife Vanessa moved back into my house. They'd sold their condo, said they wanted to be closer to help me after Margaret passed. I'd been so grateful. The house had felt too big, too quiet without her. I welcomed them in. I gave them the master bedroom. I let Vanessa take over the kitchen because she said she loved to cook and I'd been living off canned soup and toast. And now this doctor, this woman who had no reason to lie, was telling me my own family might be poisoning me. Why would they do that? I whispered, more to myself than to her. Dr. Chen leaned back in her chair and exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding that breath for too long. "I've seen cases like this before, William. Not often, but enough. Usually it's about control. Sometimes it's about money. Sometimes people convince themselves they're doing it for the right reasons, that the person is too old, too difficult, too expensive to care for. They start small, a little something to keep you calm, keep you manageable. And then it escalates. I thought about my house. The Victorian on Maple Street that Margaret and I bought in 1978. 3 stories, wrap-around porch, garden in the back where she grew tomatoes every summer. It was paid off, fully mine. And it was worth a lot now. The realtor had told me that last year when I'd casually asked. Over $1 million, maybe more depending on the market. Richard knew that. He'd made comments about it, half jokes about how lucky I was to be sitting on such valuable property. Vanessa too. She'd walked through every room when they first moved in, touching the crown molding, eyeing the original hardwood floors, saying things like, "This place could sell for a fortune if it were ever updated." "What do I do?" I asked Dr. Chen, and I hated how small my voice sounded. She pulled open her desk drawer and took out a business card. "There's a lawyer I trust, specializes in elder abuse. You need to document everything, get copies of these test results. Don't confront them yet, not until you have a plan. And William," she paused, her eyes locking onto mine, "don't eat or drink anything in that house that you didn't prepare yourself, not until you know who's behind this." I took the card. My hands were trembling now, the kind of shake that comes from fear, not age. "They're my family," I said, though even as the words left my mouth, they felt hollow. She nodded slowly. "I know. And that's what makes this so hard. But family or not, someone is hurting you, and you deserve to know why." I left that office in a daze. The note she'd hidden in my bag felt like it was burning through the fabric. I didn't read it until I got to my car, a old Buick that still ran smooth despite being 15 years old. I sat in the driver's seat, door closed, and unfolded the yellow square. Her handwriting was rushed, almost frantic. "William, trust no one at home. They may be watching your accounts, your movements. If you need help, call this number. Do not let them know you know. Your life may depend on it." Below that, a phone number I didn't recognize. I sat there for a long time, staring at the dashboard, trying to make sense of it. The parking lot outside was full of people coming and going, living normal lives, picking up prescriptions, checking in for appointments. And here I was, 73 years old, being told to run from my own son. The sun was starting to set, casting long orange shadows across the pavement. I thought about Margaret. What would she do? She was always the strong one, the one who made the hard calls when I couldn't. She would have marched right back into that house, confronted Richard and Vanessa, demanded the truth. But Margaret wasn't here anymore. It was just me. And I was scared. I started the car and pulled out of the lot, but I didn't go home. Not yet. Instead, I drove to the cemetery where Margaret was buried. It was only 10 minutes away. A quiet place with old oaks and granite headstones that had been there longer than I'd been alive. I parked near her plot and walked over, my knees aching with each step. Her stone was simple. Margaret Ann Brennan, beloved wife and mother, 1949 to 2023. I knelt down in the grass, ignoring the dampness seeping through my pant legs, and pressed my hand against the cold marble. "Maggie," I whispered. "I don't know what to do. Our boy, our Richard, I think he's trying to hurt me, and I don't understand why." The wind picked up, rustling the leaves above, and for just a moment I swear I felt her there beside me. Not literally, but the way you feel someone you love even when they're gone, like an echo in your chest. She would have told me to be smart, to protect myself, to not let sentiment cloud survival. I stayed there until the sky turned dark and the groundskeeper's truck rolled past, headlights sweeping over the graves. Then I stood, brushed the dirt off my knees, and walked back to the car. I had a choice to make. Go home and pretend nothing was wrong, keep eating Vanessa's cooking and drinking the tea Richard always made me before bed, slowly lose more of myself until I couldn't fight back. Or I could follow Dr. Chen's advice, document, plan, and if necessary, run. I thought about that word, run. It sounded absurd for a man my age. Where would I even go? I had some savings, enough to get by, but nothing extravagant. A few old friends still alive, but none close enough to burden with something like this. And if I left, if I just disappeared, what would Richard do? Would he come looking? Would he call the police? Report me missing? Play the concerned son while the whole time he knew exactly why I'd gone? The thought made my stomach turn. But then I remembered something Dr. Chen had said. Your life may depend on it. Not your comfort, not your pride. Your life. And suddenly running didn't sound so absurd anymore. It sounded like the only sane option left. I drove home slowly, taking the long way through streets I'd known for decades. Past the elementary school where my kids used to play, past the diner where Margaret and I had our first date, past the park where I taught Richard to ride a bike. Every memory felt tainted now, like someone had poured poison into a well I'd been drinking from my whole life. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the house was lit up. Warm yellow light spilling from the windows, the porch light on like a welcome. It looked safe. It looked like home. But I knew better now. I sat in the car for a minute, gathering myself, then grabbed my bag and walked inside. Richard was in the living room, feet up on the coffee table, watching some crime show on TV. He looked up when I came in and smiled. Hey, Dad, how'd the appointment go? His voice was casual, friendly, like he actually cared. I forced a smile back. Fine, just routine stuff. He nodded and turned back to the screen. Vanessa was in the kitchen. I could hear her humming, the sound of pots clanging. The smell of something cooking, garlic and butter, drifted through the house. My stomach growled despite everything. Dinner's almost ready, she called out. I made your favorite pot roast. Pot roast. Margaret used to make it every Sunday. I wondered if Vanessa knew that, if she'd chosen it on purpose to make me feel safe, to make me lower my guard. I went upstairs to my bedroom, the smaller one they'd let me keep when they took over the master. I closed the door and locked it, something I never used to do. Then I pulled out the note and read it again. Just run away from your family now. Don't ever think of looking back. I sat on the edge of my bed, the springs creaking under my weight, and stared at the phone number she'd written. One call. That's all it would take to start this. To set everything in motion. To possibly destroy what was left of my family, or to save my own life. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over the keypad, and that's when I heard it. Footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate, stopping right outside my door. Then Richard's voice, low and cautious. Dad, you okay in there? I froze, my heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it through the wood. Yeah, I managed to say. Just tired. I'll be down in a minute. A pause. Then, all right, don't take too long. Vanessa worked hard on this meal. His footsteps retreated. I waited until I couldn't hear them anymore. Then I dialed the number. It rang 3 times before someone picked up. A woman's voice, calm and professional. Safe Harbor Resources, this is Angela. How can I help you? I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come at first. Finally, I whispered, I think my family is trying to kill me. Loud for the first time. I think my family is trying to kill me. Most people would have laughed, asked if I was joking, maybe even hung up. But Angela just took a breath and said, Okay, William, I'm listening. Tell me everything. So I did. Sitting on the edge of my bed with the door locked and my heart hammering against my ribs, I told her about the blood tests, about Dr. Chen's warning, about the 4 months of fog I'd been living in, while Richard and Vanessa smiled at me across the dinner table. She didn't interrupt once, just let me spill it all out like poison from a wound. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. William, you're the 3rd call I've gotten this month with almost the exact same story. 3rd. Not 1st. Not some rare anomaly. 3rd. How does this happen? I asked, my voice barely holding together. Angela's tone shifted, became more clinical, like she was reading from a script she'd memorized from too much repetition. Financial abuse of the elderly is more common than most people realize. Adult children move back in, especially after a parent loses a spouse. They position themselves as caretakers. Slowly, they isolate the parent from friends, from outside contact. Then they start controlling finances, sometimes forging signatures, sometimes just taking advantage of confusion or grief. And in cases like yours, when the parent still has mental clarity, they introduce sedatives to create that confusion artificially. I thought about the past 4 months again, but this time with new eyes. How Richard had suggested I stop driving to the senior center on Thursdays, said the roads were getting too dangerous for someone my age. How Vanessa had slowly taken over answering my phone, screening calls, telling people I was resting or not feeling well. How my old poker buddies had stopped coming around after Richard told them I wasn't up for company anymore. I'd thought they were being protective, loving. Now I saw it for what it was, a cage, built slowly, bar by bar, until I was trapped and didn't even know it. "What do I do?" I asked Angela. She didn't hesitate. "First, do not eat or drink anything in that house tonight. Tell them you're not feeling well, that you'll eat later. Second, tomorrow morning you need to go to your bank and check all your accounts. Look for any unusual withdrawals, transfers, anything you didn't authorize. Third, you need to secure your important documents. Birth certificate, will, property deed, anything they could use or alter. And fourth," she paused, and I could hear papers rustling on her end, "you need to decide if you're ready to leave. Because once you start asking questions, once they realize you know, things could escalate quickly." Escalate. Such a clean word for something so ugly. I pictured Richard's face, the way he'd looked at me through the door just minutes ago. Had there been something behind that concern? Something darker I'd missed? "I don't have anywhere to go," I said, and hated how defeated I sounded. Angela's voice softened. "We have a safe house. It's specifically for situations like this. You wouldn't be the first person to use it, and you won't be the last. It's not fancy, but it's secure. And it'll give you time to figure out your next steps without looking over your shoulder every second." A safe house. Like I was in witness protection or some crime thriller. Except this was my life. My son. My family. "How long would I need to stay there?" I asked. "As long as it takes," Angela said. "Could be a week, could be a month. Depends on what we find, what legal action you want to take. But William, I need you to understand something. If your son and daughter-in-law are doing what Dr. Chen suspects, they're not going to just let you walk away. Your house, your assets, whatever they've been planning, you leaving disrupts all of that. So we need to be smart. We need to be careful." There was a knock on my door. Sharp, impatient. Vanessa's voice came through, sugary sweet. "William, dinner's getting cold, honey. You really should come eat." I covered the phone's mouthpiece with my hand. "I'll be right there," I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. I heard her footsteps linger for a moment, then fade away. I uncovered the phone. "They're calling me down for dinner," I whispered to Angela. "What do I say?" "Tell them you're not hungry. You had a big lunch. Your stomach's upset. Anything. Just do not eat that food, William. Do you understand me?" The urgency in her voice cut through my hesitation. "I understand." "Good," she said. "Now, can you get out of the house first thing tomorrow morning? Early, before they wake up?" I thought about it. Richard usually slept until 8. Vanessa even later. "I can leave by 6, I said. "Do it. Drive to this address." She rattled off a street name I didn't recognize, somewhere across town. "It's a coffee shop. Park in the back. Someone will meet you there at 6:30. Her name is Patricia. She'll help you get to the safe house and start the documentation process." Documentation. Evidence. Legal action. The words felt surreal. This was my son we were talking about. The boy I'd taught to throw a baseball. The kid who used to climb into bed with Margaret and me during thunderstorms because he was scared of the lightning. How did that boy turn into someone who would drug his own father? William? Angela's voice pulled me back. Are you still with me? Yeah, I said. I'm here. I know this is hard, she said gently, but you're doing the right thing, and you're not alone in this. We're going to help you. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe that someone out there actually cared whether I lived or died. Thank you, I managed to say. Get some rest tonight if you can, Angela said. And if anything happens, if you feel unsafe at any point, you call 911 first, then you call this number again, okay? Okay. You're going to be all right, William. Just hold on a little longer. I hung up and sat there in the silence of my bedroom, staring at the phone in my hand. Downstairs, I could hear the TV still playing, the murmur of Richard and Vanessa talking, the clatter of dishes. Normal sounds, domestic sounds, the kind that should make you feel safe. Instead, they made my skin crawl. I stood up slowly, my joints protesting, and walked to the closet. In the back, buried under old coats and boxes of Margaret's things I couldn't bring myself to donate, was a small, fireproof safe. I'd bought it years ago to store our passports, the deed to the house, Margaret's jewelry. I pulled it out now, blew the dust off the top, and opened it with the combination I'd never forgotten. Everything was still there. My birth certificate, Margaret's death certificate, the will we'd drawn up together, leaving the house and everything in it to be split equally among our 3 children. I stared at that will for a long time. Richard wasn't the only one who stood to inherit. There was also my daughter Emma, living in Seattle with her husband and 2 kids, and my youngest, Thomas, who'd moved to Europe 5 years ago for work and barely called anymore. Would they know what Richard was doing? Would they care? Or had I become nothing more than a dollar sign to all of them, a countdown to an inheritance they were tired of waiting for? The thought made me feel sick. I closed the safe and shoved it back into the closet. Tomorrow I'd take it with me. Tonight I just had to survive. I went downstairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. Richard and Vanessa were seated at the dining table, plates already filled. The pot roast sat in the center, steaming, surrounded by roasted carrots and potatoes that glistened with butter. It looked perfect. It smelled like home, and I couldn't touch a bite of it. There you are, Vanessa said, smiling wide. She'd always had a pretty smile. Margaret used to say Vanessa lit up a room. Now all I could see was the calculation behind it, the performance. Come sit, sweetheart. I made extra gravy, just how you like it. I stayed in the doorway. Actually, I'm not feeling great. I think I'm going to skip dinner tonight. Richard's fork paused halfway to his mouth. You okay, Dad? There it was again. That concern. That perfectly practiced tone. I forced myself to meet his eyes. Yeah, just an upset stomach. Probably something I ate at lunch. Vanessa stood up, already moving toward me. Let me make you some tea. Chamomile always settles your stomach. No, I said too quickly. She stopped. Richard's eyes narrowed just slightly. I'm fine, I added, softer. I just need to lie down. You two enjoy. It looks great, Vanessa. She smiled again, but it didn't reach her eyes this time. All right, well, if you change your mind, I'll leave a plate in the fridge. Thanks. I turned and walked back toward the stairs, feeling their eyes on my back the whole way. When I reached my room, I locked the door again and pressed my ear against it, listening. For a few minutes, there was nothing. Then I heard Richard's voice, low and tense, though I couldn't make out the words. Vanessa responded, her tone sharp. They were arguing. About me. About something. I pulled away from the door and sat on my bed, my whole body shaking now. This was real. This wasn't paranoia or grief or old age making me imagine things. My own son was plotting something, and I'd just tipped them off that I might be onto them. Angela's words echoed in my head. Once they realize you know, things could escalate quickly. I looked at the clock. It was barely 7:30. I had to make it to 6 in the morning. 10.5 hours I could do that, I had to. I grabbed the duffel bag from my closet, the one I used to take on fishing trips with Margaret, and started packing. Not much. A few changes of clothes, my medications, the real ones prescribed by Dr. Chen, not whatever Richard might have been slipping me. Toiletries, the fireproof safe, Margaret's wedding ring, which I still wore on a chain around my neck. I moved quietly, trying not to make noise, hyper-aware of every creak in the floorboards. At one point, I heard footsteps in the hallway again. They stopped outside my door. I froze, holding my breath. Then Richard's voice, muffled. "Dad, you sure you don't want anything? Some crackers, maybe? Ginger ale?" "I'm fine," I called back, "just trying to sleep." A long pause. "All right, let me know if you need anything." The footsteps retreated. I waited until I heard his bedroom door close down the hall before I started packing again. When the bag was ready, I hid it in the back of my closet, covered it with an old blanket. Then I lay down on top of my bed, fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling. Sleep felt impossible. Every sound in the house became a threat. The creak of pipes, the hum of the refrigerator, the wind rattling the windows. I kept my phone in my hand, Angela's number pulled up and ready to dial. Around midnight, I heard their bedroom door open. Footsteps moving down the hallway, slow and deliberate. They stopped outside my door again. I closed my eyes and forced my breathing to stay even, like I was asleep. The doorknob turned, locked. Thank God I'd locked it. A pause. Then a whisper. Vanessa's voice. "Should we try to get in?" Richard's response was too quiet to hear. Then the footsteps moved away, back down the hall. I lay there, heart pounding, staring at that locked door. What were they planning to do? What would have happened if I hadn't locked it? The hours crawled by. At some point, exhaustion overtook fear and I must have dozed off, because when I opened my eyes again, the room was still dark, but my phone said it was 5:15 in the morning. Close enough. I sat up, every muscle stiff, and grabbed the duffel bag from the closet. I moved to the window and looked out. The street was empty, just the glow of streetlights and the first hint of gray on the horizon. I could do this. I could leave. I unlocked my bedroom door as quietly as possible and stepped into the hallway. The house was silent. Richard and Vanessa's door was closed. I crept down the stairs, avoiding the third step that always creaked, and made it to the front door. My keys were on the hook where I always left them. I grabbed them, then hesitated. There was a part of me, some stupid sentimental part, that wanted to leave a note, to explain, to say goodbye. But what would I even write? "Dear Richard, I know you're poisoning me, so I'm leaving." No, Angela was right. Once they knew I was onto them, once they realized I'd run, things would get worse. Better to just disappear and let them wonder. I opened the front door, stepped out into the cold morning air, and pulled it shut behind me as softly as I could. Then I walked to my car, threw the duffel bag in the back seat, and started the engine. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced up at the house one last time. My home, the place where I'd raised my family, buried my wife's ashes in the garden like she'd asked, lived every significant moment of my adult life. And now I was running from it like a fugitive. I drove through the empty streets, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles went white. The coffee shop Angela had mentioned was on the east side of town, a place I'd never been. I pulled into the back parking lot at exactly 6:28 and killed the engine. For 2 minutes, I sat there alone, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. Then a car pulled in beside me. A woman got out, older than I expected, maybe in her 60s, with short gray hair and kind eyes. She walked over and tapped on my window. I rolled it down. "William?" she asked. I nodded. She smiled, and it was the first genuine warmth I'd felt in days. "I'm Patricia. Let's get you somewhere safe." Patricia's car smelled like lavender and old books. I followed her in my own Buick, keeping her taillights in view as we wound through streets I barely recognized, heading toward the outskirts of town where the houses thinned out and the trees grew thicker. My rearview mirror became an obsession. Every set of headlights behind me felt like Richard, like he'd woken up early and discovered I was gone and was already hunting me down. But no one followed. The roads stayed empty except for the occasional commuter heading into the city. After 20 minutes, Patricia's blinker flashed and she turned onto a gravel driveway that disappeared into a cluster of pine trees. I followed, my tires crunching over the stones, and we emerged into a small clearing where a modest ranch house sat, painted pale blue with white shutters. It looked ordinary, unremarkable. Exactly the kind of place you'd drive past without a second thought. Which I supposed was the point. Patricia parked and got out, waiting for me by her car as I pulled up beside her. When I stepped out, my legs felt weak, like I'd run a marathon instead of just driving across town. "You made it," she said, and there was relief in her voice. "How are you holding up?" I wanted to say I was fine, but the word caught in my throat. Instead, I just shook my head. She nodded, like she understood, and gestured toward the house. "Come on, let's get you inside. There's coffee and we can talk through everything." I grabbed my duffel bag from the back seat and followed her up the porch steps. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the house was small but clean, furnished with mismatched furniture that looked donated. A couch with floral upholstery. A wooden coffee table with water rings on the surface. A kitchenette in the corner with a coffee maker already brewing. It smelled like safety, if safety had a smell. Like nobody here wanted anything from me. Patricia poured 2 cups of coffee and handed me one. I wrapped both hands around it, letting the heat seep into my palms. "This is a safe house," she explained, settling into a chair across from me. "We've helped dozens of people through situations like yours. You can stay here as long as you need. No one knows about this place except our organization and the people we're helping. Your son won't find you here." I took a sip of the coffee. It was strong, bitter, exactly what I needed. "What happens now?" I asked. Patricia pulled a folder out of her bag and set it on the table between us. "Now we document everything. I need you to walk me through the timeline again, every detail you can remember. When things started feeling off, when Richard and Vanessa moved in, any financial discussions you've had, any changes to your routine. The more we have, the stronger your case will be." Case. The word made it real in a way it hadn't been before. This wasn't just running away. This was building evidence, possibly pressing charges, possibly destroying my son's life. "I don't know if I can do that," I said quietly. Patricia leaned forward, her eyes steady on mine. "William, I know he's your son. I know this feels like a betrayal. But what he's doing to you, that's the real betrayal. You didn't ask for this. You didn't deserve this. And if you don't stop him now, he won't stop on his own." I thought about the locked door last night, about Vanessa whispering, "Should we try to get in?" About the months of fog, the lost time, the way my own memories had become unreliable. Patricia was right. This wouldn't stop. "Okay," I said. "Where do we start?" She opened the folder and pulled out a legal pad and pen. "Start with the first time you noticed something was wrong." So I did. I told her about Margaret's death 8 months ago, how the grief had swallowed me whole for weeks, how Richard had called every day checking in, suggesting he and Vanessa move back home to help out. At the time, I'd been grateful. The house felt too empty without Margaret's voice filling it, her laughter, her presence. I'd said yes without hesitation. They'd moved in a month later. "At first it was nice," I said, staring down into my coffee. "Vanessa cooked. Richard handled the yard work. They took care of things I didn't have the energy for. But then, maybe 6 weeks in, I started feeling off. Tired all the time. My thoughts would get fuzzy, like I was trying to think through cotton. I'd forget conversations we'd had the day before." Patricia wrote quickly, her pen scratching across the page. "Did they ever suggest you see a doctor for it?" I nodded. Richard did. He made an appointment with Dr. Chen, actually. Said it was probably just depression, that it was normal after losing a spouse. She prescribed something mild, an antidepressant, but even after I started taking it, the fog didn't lift. It got worse. And you didn't think that was strange? Patricia asked. I shrugged. I'm 73. I figured maybe this was just what getting old felt like. My body slowing down, my mind following. Patricia set down her pen and looked at me. William, aging doesn't make you forget entire days. That's not normal. That's chemical. I knew she was right, but hearing it out loud still made my chest tighten. When did the financial conversation start? She asked. I had to think back. Maybe 3 months ago. Richard started talking about how expensive it was to maintain the house. Property taxes, utilities, repairs. He suggested selling, said we could split the money and I could move into a retirement community, somewhere with less upkeep. I told him no. The house was Margaret's and mine. I wasn't ready to let it go. Patricia's expression darkened. How did he react? He didn't push, I said. Not at first. But Vanessa started leaving brochures around. Fancy senior living places with pictures of old people playing golf and doing yoga. Every few days there'd be a new one on the kitchen counter. And Richard would mention it casually like, Dad, did you see that place in the brochure? It looks nice, doesn't it? Patricia made a note. Classic pressure tactics. They plant the idea, let it simmer, make you think it was your decision. I hadn't thought of it that way, but she was right. They'd been working on me, slowly, subtly, trying to wear me down. Did they ever ask you to sign anything? Patricia asked. The question hit me like a punch. Yes, I said slowly. About a month ago. Richard brought home some papers, said they were for updating my will. He said it was important to have everything in order just in case. I was going to read through them, but he said they were standard, that the lawyer had already reviewed everything. I signed. Patricia's jaw tightened. Do you have a copy? I shook my head. Richard said he'd file them and get me a copy later. He never did. She wrote something in all caps and underlined it twice. We need to find out what you signed. If they had you sign over power of attorney or change your will without you fully understanding, that's fraud. And it's prosecutable. The room felt smaller suddenly. I set my coffee down because my hands were shaking too much to hold it. I trusted him, I said, my voice breaking. He's my son. I thought he was helping. Patricia reached across the table and put her hand over mine. I know, and he used that trust against you. That's what makes this so cruel. For a moment, we just sat there in silence. Then Patricia pulled her hand back and flipped to a new page on her legal pad. All right, here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to get you to a bank this morning. You need to check all your accounts, see if there have been any unauthorized withdrawals or transfers. Second, we're going to contact a lawyer who specializes in elder abuse and fraud. He'll help us figure out what you signed and whether it's legally binding. Third, we're going to get you a new phone. If Richard has access to your current one, he might be tracking it. I hadn't even thought of that. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and stared at it like it was a live grenade. He bought this for me last Christmas, I said. He set it up, showed me how to use it. Patricia nodded grimly. Then we have to assume he can see where you are. Turn it off. Don't turn it back on. We'll get you a burner this afternoon. I powered it down and set it on the table. Without it, I felt unmoored, cut off. But Patricia was right. If Richard could track me, then leaving the house this morning meant nothing. He'd already know where I was. Do you think he knows I'm gone yet? I asked. Patricia glanced at the clock on the wall. It was nearly 7:30. If they're early risers, maybe. But even if they do, they won't know where you went. And legally, you're an adult. You're allowed to leave your own home. They can't report you missing or do anything official. Not yet, anyway. Not yet. The words hung in the air like a threat. What do you mean, not yet? I asked. Patricia hesitated, then sighed. If they've already filed paperwork claiming you're mentally incompetent, if they've gotten a doctor to sign off on it or forge documents, they could try to argue that you're a danger to yourself, that you wandered off in a confused state. It's a long shot, but I've seen it happen. The idea of Richard telling the police I was senile, that I'd wandered off and needed to be brought back for my own safety, made my stomach turn. He wouldn't do that, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I wasn't sure I believed them anymore. Patricia gave me a sad smile. William, he's been drugging you for months. There's not much he wouldn't do at this point. She was right. I knew she was right. But accepting it felt like swallowing glass. Let's focus on what we can control, Patricia said, steering us back. We'll go to the bank in an hour. For now, why don't you get some rest? There's a bedroom down the hall. It's not much, but the bed's comfortable. You look like you haven't slept in days. I wanted to argue, to say I was fine, but exhaustion was catching up with me now that the adrenaline was fading. Okay, I said. I stood, grabbed my duffel bag and followed her down a narrow hallway to a small room with a single bed and a dresser. The walls were bare except for a cross hanging above the headboard. I'll wake you in 45 minutes, Patricia said. Try to rest. She closed the door and I was alone. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my phone, the one I'd just turned off. For a moment I thought about powering it back on just to see if Richard had called, if he'd texted, if he even cared that I was gone. But I didn't. Instead, I set it on the nightstand and lay back on the bed, staring up at the ceiling. The house was quiet. No footsteps, no whispers, no one watching. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. But the relief was fleeting because behind it came the grief. Grief for the son I thought I had, for the family I thought we were, for the life I thought I'd live out in that house on Maple Street, surrounded by people who loved me. I closed my eyes and Margaret's face appeared in my mind. Not the way she looked at the end, frail and tired, but the way she looked on our wedding day, young, radiant, full of hope. I'm sorry, Maggie, I whispered into the empty room. I don't know how we raised him to be like this. There was no answer, of course, just silence. But somewhere in that silence, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Richard win. I wasn't going to disappear quietly or let him take everything Margaret and I had built. If he wanted a fight, I'd give him one, even if it broke my heart in the process. Patricia knocked on the door exactly 45 minutes later. I hadn't slept, but I felt steadier, more resolved. You ready? She asked. I stood, grabbed my coat, and nodded. Let's go. We drove to the bank in her car, leaving my Buick at the safe house. The whole way there, I kept expecting to see Richard's truck behind us, but the road stayed clear. The bank was in the center of town, a place I'd been going to for 30 years. The teller, a young woman named Stephanie, recognized me immediately. Mr. Brennan, she said, smiling. How can I help you today? I need to check my accounts, I said. All of them. I want to see every transaction from the past 6 months. Her smile faltered slightly. Is everything okay? Just need to review some things, I said, keeping my voice steady. She nodded and pulled up my information on her computer. Patricia stood beside me, silent but present. Stephanie scrolled through the screen, her eyebrows furrowing. Mr. Brennan, it looks like there have been several large withdrawals over the past few months. Did you authorize these? My heart sank. How large? She turned the screen toward me. My savings account, which had over $80,000 in it 6 months ago, now had $12,000. Withdrawal after withdrawal, each one for $5,000 or $10,000, spread out over weeks. I stared at the numbers, my vision blurring. I didn't authorize any of this, I said. Stephanie's face went pale. I'm so sorry, Mr. Brennan. We'll need to file a fraud report immediately. Do you know who might have accessed your account? I looked at Patricia. She nodded. I turned back to Stephanie. "My son," I said. "Richard Brennan." The bank manager's office smelled like stale coffee and printer ink. His name was David Carmichael, and he'd been managing this branch for less than a year, which meant he didn't know me the way the old manager had. He didn't know that Margaret and I had opened our first joint account here in 1979. He didn't know that Richard had his first savings account here when he was 7 years old, depositing birthday money with a gap-toothed smile. All David Carmichael knew was that there was a potential fraud case sitting in his office, and it was making him nervous. He pulled up my account history on his computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. Patricia sat beside me, a legal pad balanced on her knee, taking notes. I just sat there, my hands folded in my lap, trying to process the fact that my son had stolen nearly $70,000 from me. 70,000. The number kept echoing in my head like a scream. "Mr. Brennan," David said, turning the monitor so I could see it better. "All of these withdrawals were made in person at our branch on Oak Street, the one near the highway." I knew that branch. It was on the other side of town, nowhere near my house. I never went there. "Did you make these withdrawals?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "No," I said. "I've never even been to that branch." David scrolled through more screens. "According to our records, the person who made these withdrawals presented identification and signed withdrawal slips. The signatures match what we have on file for you." He pulled up an image, a scanned copy of a withdrawal slip. The signature at the bottom looked like mine. Same looping W, same cramped letters, but I hadn't written it. "That's not my signature," I said. But even as I said it, doubt crept in. It looked so much like my handwriting. David zoomed in on the signature. "Are you certain? Because if someone forged this, we'll need to involve law enforcement. This would be a criminal matter." Patricia leaned forward. "Mr. Brennan has been experiencing cognitive issues over the past several months due to being unknowingly sedated by a family member. It's possible he was brought to the bank in an impaired state and coerced into signing these slips without understanding what he was doing." David's expression shifted from nervous to alarmed. "Sedated? By a family member?" "We have medical documentation," Patricia said, pulling a folder from her bag. She'd gotten copies of my blood work from Dr. Chen this morning, along with a letter explaining the findings. David took the papers and read through them, his jaw tightening with each line. When he finished, he set them down and looked at me with something I hadn't expected. Compassion. "Mr. Brennan, I'm so sorry this happened to you. We're going to do everything we can to help. I'm going to start a fraud investigation immediately, and I'll need you to file a police report as well. The bank will cooperate fully." A police report. That meant making this official. That meant Richard would know I'd discovered what he'd done. That meant there was no going back. "What if I don't want to press charges?" I asked quietly. David and Patricia both stared at me. "William," Patricia said gently, "if you don't report this, he gets away with it, and he'll keep doing it. To you, and possibly to others." I knew she was right, but the thought of my son in handcuffs, being led away by police, facing a judge, maybe going to prison, it made me feel like I was drowning. "He's my boy," I whispered. "I know," Patricia said. "But he stopped being your boy the moment he decided to steal from you." David cleared his throat. "Mr. Brennan, I understand this is difficult, but I have to tell you, we've flagged your accounts. No further withdrawals can be made without you being present and showing identification. And we're going to issue you new account numbers, new cards. Whatever access your son had, he won't have it anymore." That was something, at least. "Thank you," I said. David stood and extended his hand. I shook it, his grip firm and reassuring. "We'll be in touch as soon as the investigation progresses. In the meantime, please be careful. If your son realizes what's happening, he may try to contact you." We left the bank and got back into Patricia's car. I felt hollowed out, like someone had scooped out my insides and left just the shell. "You did the right thing," Patricia said as she started the engine. "I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but you did." I didn't respond. I just stared out the window as we drove, watching the town I'd lived in my whole life pass by like it belonged to someone else now. Everything looked different. The coffee shop where Margaret and I used to get Sunday breakfast. The park where I'd pushed my kids on the swings. The library where Richard had spent hours reading as a boy, always the quiet one, always the smart one. How had that boy turned into this? We stopped at an electronics store on the way back to the safe house. Patricia bought me a prepaid cell phone, the kind you see in movies when people are trying to stay off the grid. She programmed her number into it, along with Angela's and the local police non-emergency line. "This is your lifeline now," she said, handing it to me. "Keep it charged. Keep it on you. If anything happens, you call." I slipped it into my coat pocket. My old phone was still in her glove compartment, powered off, a relic of the life I'd left behind this morning. When we got back to the safe house, there was another car in the driveway, a sleek gray sedan that looked expensive. Patricia noticed my hesitation. "That's Marcus," she said. "The lawyer I told you about. He came as soon as I called." We went inside. The man waiting in the living room was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with dark skin and close-cropped hair. He stood when we entered and extended his hand. "Mr. Brennan, I'm Marcus Webb. I specialize in elder abuse and financial exploitation cases. Patricia filled me in on your situation. I'm here to help." His handshake was confident and his eyes were sharp but kind. We sat down, and he pulled out a tablet, swiping through notes he'd already started compiling. "First," Marcus said, "let's talk about what you signed a month ago. Do you remember anything specific about those documents?" I tried to think back, but that whole period was fuzzy. Richard said they were updates to my will. He said it was standard stuff, that the lawyer had already reviewed it. I trusted him. Marcus nodded, making notes. "We're going to need to get copies of those documents. I'll file a request with the county clerk's office today. If he filed anything changing your will or granting himself power of attorney, it'll be on record." "What if he didn't file them?" I asked. "What if he just had me sign them and kept them?" Marcus met my eyes. "Then we find them. And if we can prove he obtained your signature under duress or through deception, any changes are voidable. But William, I need you to understand something. This is going to get messy. Your son will likely hire his own lawyer. He'll fight back. Are you prepared for that?" Was I prepared? I didn't know. How do you prepare for your own child to become your enemy? "I don't have a choice," I said finally. Marcus gave a small, approving nod. "Good, because you're right. You don't." He spent the next hour walking me through the legal process, filing for a restraining order to keep Richard and Vanessa away from me, freezing any joint accounts or assets, contacting my other children, Emma and Thomas, to inform them of what was happening. That last part made my stomach twist. "Do I have to tell them?" I asked. "Not legally," Marcus said, "but they have a right to know. And if Richard has been named in your will, they need to understand that there may be challenges to it down the line." Emma, Thomas. I hadn't spoken to either of them in weeks. Emma had called after Margaret died, stayed for the funeral, then gone back to her life in Seattle. Thomas had sent flowers and a sympathy card from Prague but hadn't come home. We'd drifted apart over the years, the way families do when distance and life get in the way. Would they believe me when I told them what Richard had done? Or would they think I was losing my mind, that grief had made me paranoid? "I'll call them," I said. "But not yet. I need to figure out what I'm going to say first." Marcus closed his tablet. "Fair enough. For now, focus on taking care of yourself. Stay here. Don't go back to that house. Don't contact Richard or Vanessa. Let me and Patricia handle the legal side." He stood to leave, shaking my hand again. "You're doing the right thing, William. I know it's hard, but you're standing up for yourself. A lot of people in your position don't." After he left, Patricia made us lunch. Sandwiches and soup, simple but warm. We ate in comfortable silence, and for a little while, I let myself pretend this was normal. Just two people sharing a meal. Not a man hiding from his own family. But the illusion shattered when Patricia's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, frowned, and answered. "This is Patricia." I watched her face change as she listened, her expression going from curious to grim. "When?" she asked. A pause. "Okay, thank you for letting me know." She hung up and looked at me. That was Angela. "Richard filed a missing persons report an hour ago. He's telling the police you have dementia and wandered off in a confused state. He's asking them to issue a silver alert." The room tilted. A silver alert. That was for elderly people with cognitive impairments who'd gone missing. It would put my face on the news, on highway signs, in police databases. It would make me look like a victim who needed to be rescued and brought home to my loving family. "He's trying to force me back," I said, my voice shaking. Patricia nodded. "It's a manipulation tactic. He wants to control the narrative. Make it look like you're incompetent, so that when you accuse him of theft and abuse, no one believes you." I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "What do I do?" Patricia was already dialing. "I'm calling Marcus. We're going to get ahead of this. You're going to go to the police yourself right now and tell them you're not missing. You left of your own free will, and you're going to file your own report about the theft and the drugging." She handed me my new phone. "Call Emma. Call Thomas. Tell them what's happening before Richard does. You need people in your corner, William. You need your family to know the truth." My hands were shaking as I took the phone. I pulled up the keypad and stared at it. Emma's number. I'd had it memorized for years. I dialed. It rang 4 times before she picked up. "Hello?" Her voice was cautious, wary of the unfamiliar number. "Emma, it's Dad." Silence. Then, "Dad? Whose phone is this? Are you okay?" I took a breath, trying to steady myself. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen, really listen, before you say anything." Another pause. "Okay, I'm listening." So I told her. Everything. The drugging, the stolen money, the forged signatures, Dr. Chen's warning, running to the safe house, the fraud investigation, Richard's missing persons report. I spoke quickly, the words tumbling out in a rush, afraid that if I stopped I'd lose the courage to continue. When I finished, there was nothing but silence on the other end. "Emma," I said, "are you still there?" Her voice, when it came, was tight with emotion. "I'm here, Dad. I don't know what to say. Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure it was Richard?" The question stung, but I understood it. This was her brother. "I'm sure," I said. "I have medical records, bank statements. I wouldn't make this up, honey. I wouldn't." I heard her take a shaky breath. "Where are you now? Are you safe?" "I'm safe. I'm with people who are helping me. But Richard filed a police report saying I have dementia and I'm missing. I need you to know that's not true. I'm fine. I left because I had to." "Oh my God," Emma whispered. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I should have been there. I should have checked on you more after Mom died. I just thought Richard was taking care of you. I thought you were okay." "It's not your fault," I said, even though part of me wished she had been there, wished someone had noticed what was happening. "But I need you to back me up on this. If Richard calls you, if the police call you, I need you to tell them I'm not incompetent, that I'm making my own decisions." "I will," she said immediately. "Of course I will. Do you want me to come home? I can get on a plane tonight." The offer made my throat tight. "Not yet. Let me get this sorted out first. But Emma, there's one more thing. I need you to call Thomas, tell him what's happening. I don't think I can go through this again right now." "I'll call him as soon as we hang up," she promised. "Dad, I love you. We're going to get through this, okay? You're not alone." Those words, simple as they were, nearly broke me. "I love you too, sweetheart. Thank you. We said goodbye, and I set the phone down on the table, my whole body trembling. Patricia put a hand on my shoulder. You did good, she said. That took courage. I didn't feel courageous. I felt like I was barely holding myself together. But I nodded anyway. An hour later, we were at the police station. Marcus met us there, carrying a briefcase full of documents. The officer who took my statement was a woman in her 50s named Sergeant Brooks. She listened without interrupting as I explained everything, her expression carefully neutral. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me. Mr. Brennan, I'm going to be honest with you. Your son's report was filed first, and it paints a very different picture. He says you've been increasingly confused over the past few months, that you've accused him of things that didn't happen, that you've become paranoid. My heart sank. He's lying. Sergeant Brooks held up a hand. I'm not saying I don't believe you, but you need to understand, from our perspective, we have two conflicting stories. We'll investigate both. But in the meantime, the silver alert stands until we can verify your mental competency. Marcus leaned forward. Sergeant, my client has medical documentation proving he was being drugged without his knowledge. He also has bank records showing unauthorized withdrawals totaling nearly $70,000. This isn't a case of an elderly man wandering off. This is financial exploitation and abuse. He slid the folder across the desk. Sergeant Brooks opened it and read through the documents, her expression hardening. All right, she said finally. I'll escalate this to our financial crimes unit. And I'll put a note in the system that Mr. Brennan is not missing, that he left of his own volition and is safe. But Mr. Brennan, I have to ask, are you willing to press charges against your son? This was it, the moment of no return. I thought about Richard as a little boy, the way he used to hold my hand when we crossed the street, the way he'd cried when his goldfish died and I'd helped him bury it in the backyard, the way he'd hugged me at Margaret's funeral and whispered, "We'll get through this, Dad, I promise." All lies, all manipulation, all part of a plan to take everything from me. Yes, I said, my voice steady now. I want to press charges. Sergeant Brooks nodded. Then we'll proceed. But be prepared, Mr. Brennan, this is going to be a fight. I looked at Patricia, at Marcus, at the officer across the desk. I know, I said, but I'm ready. We left the police station as the sun was setting, the sky streaked with orange and purple. Patricia drove us back to the safe house in silence. When we arrived, I went straight to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, exhausted in a way I'd never been before. Not physically, deeper than that. Soul tired. My new phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Thomas knows he's furious. He's calling Richard tonight. We've got your back, Dad. Stay strong. I read it 3 times, letting the words sink in. My children, at least 2 of them, believed me. They were standing with me. It wasn't everything, but it was something. I lay back on the bed and closed my eyes. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. Legal battles, investigations, courtrooms maybe. But tonight, I was safe. Tonight I could rest. And that would have to be enough. I thought about Margaret one last time before sleep took me. About the life we'd built, the family we'd raised, the dreams we'd shared. I'm fighting, Maggie, I whispered into the darkness. I'm not giving up. And somewhere, in the quiet space between waking and sleep, I felt her answer. Not in words, but in the steady beat of my own.